Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started here. Again, welcome everyone to the OmegaRecruit Ask Us Anything webinar. So today is going to function kind of like an open forum for you guys to ask questions. We do have questions that were submitted with registration. We're going to start with those and going through just some tips and tricks that we have for you guys, especially based on some of those questions that came in, as well as some login things that were questions that came in as well. But go ahead and put your questions in the question box while we're going over those. If you have something come up, if you want to check out that question box and make sure that is working, if you want to put what your favorite part or what your favorite thing about recruitment is, we would love to make sure that is working well. And then, like I said, as you put those questions in the box throughout the webinar, we'll have people who are answering that, or we will answer that live. If you don't mind speaking during the webinar, you can raise your hand indicating that you would like to ask that question live. And just one other note with that, if it is something that is specific to your organization, that might be something that we might have to answer separate depending on how specific it is. So just wanted to keep that in mind, but we will send you a follow-up email if that is the case. But we'll go ahead and get started with everything. My name is Sarah Beth Russell. I'm on the professional services team. With me today, I have Heather McLeod. She's our director of professional services. And then Hannah Gunderson, professional services specialist as well. We're going to be answering your question. Hannah will be reading through some of the ones that we received during registration, and we'll be in OmegaRecruit as well to show you how that works within the system also. Getting started with covering a lot of broad questions that were asked about preparing and logging in and best practices. Kind of the best things that we say to do is be proactive and prepare. I think a lot of the mistakes that we see happen when chapters only a few days before or day of are getting logged in. So make sure you're logging in at least a week in advance and getting all of your members logged in as well. Ensure that all your users, especially your voting members, can log in at least 1 week in advance. You want to make sure that they're good to go. If there is an issue with them logging in, giving that week allows time for our support team to be able to answer. We have a pretty quick turnaround time during recruitment season. That's 24/7 support. So they will be able to get back to you quickly, but doing it the day of can be harder when you're looking for that quick turnaround time. So you just want to make sure that you're doing that in advance to cause the least stress on you guys, especially if you have a really big chapter. That's going to help. And then as well as practice, using your practice files, which we'll kind of look at some today, getting familiar with the system and having your members practice as well. So you can run practice recruitments and have your members participate and vote. Also, that's going to be a really great tool to help you on the back end know how things come in, how things look, as well as your members, for them to know what voting looks like. And then the last thing is training for you as an admin, looking at any webinars, in-app help, which we'll look at where you can find that, just being comfortable with the system. Those are going to be the biggest things to help you out. And then in terms of login, just to quickly go over this because we did have a few questions about login that came in with the registrations. To get your members logged in, this is going to be the email that they see. This is, if you've never signed up before, you'll click the button to create your account. For members who have already used OmegaRecruit before, they will click to create their account, but it will take them to the login if they've already done that before. Otherwise, it'll take them through the setup process. Best practice for getting your members logged in: if you have a single sign-on with any other Omega 5 product, so Omega 1 or Vault, or even if you don't, but your members typically use XYZ email to log into your organization's login system, we suggest going into your organization system and pulling your roster and what email goes with that. That is going to be typically the one that will match if you use any other Omega 5 product, as well as just the easiest to submit. And then you can let your members know, hey, when you're signing up, use the email that you use for our organization login. And that'll kind of help smooth that out. We do have sometimes if you use a different email when you're adding the member, they will have something that says that like they can't log in, their organization hasn't added them, that sort of thing, or they can't toggle in between any other products if they use that. So just be aware of that. Make sure you're using the same email, and you can verify that with your members too, just to make sure that that is the same email that they log into anything else with. And that will kind of just help alleviate some of the login issues that you may have. Okay, and while we're answering questions, I'm gonna put this information up on the screen. This is our contact information. So we'll look at where you can go to the Get Help and our Help Center today, as well as emailing if you want to email recruitment_support@omegafy.com. They are really great at answering in a timely manner, especially during recruitment season. So that is a great way to reach out to us during that time. But I will go ahead and pass it off to Hannah, and she's going to start going through some of the questions that we have.
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to start with the questions we had pre-submitted when you guys registered. And then once we get through those, there's just a few of them. We're going to go to the ones in the chat. I already see some questions coming through, so feel free to keep sending those. Also, once we get to the questions that are in the chat, if you want to be able to unmute and talk with us, you do have the option to, so you can just raise your hand and then we'll make it so you can unmute, but don't feel pressured if you don't want to speak at all, or if you're like at a coffee shop or you feel like it's gonna be too loud. No pressure, we can still answer your question just by you sending it in the chat. So starting with our pre-submitted questions, one of them was asking, they said they need an easy way to watch who doesn't have party scores for that round before going into the flagging round or going into the next round. So who, I think what they mean is like, how can they easily see which PNMs don't have scores before they advance to the next round, just to make sure everybody got all their scores in?
Okay, perfect. Yeah, we can look at that in OmegaRecruit. So we'll hop over here. When you're looking at who doesn't have scoring, you can use these sections to sort things here. So you can use the sort field here and type in, or you can just double click and it will show. So if you wanted to reverse do that, because most of your PNMs are going to have scores, you want to reverse that to see who doesn't. Anybody who just shows active right there, they don't have a score. And you can also filter that as well by adding in, like, I think party 1. And it will only show members in party 1 that don't have a score. So that's a good way to look at this, because like here you can see I can't scroll any. This is all the PNMs that are in party 1, and all of these don't have a score, but this one does. So that's a good way to see if there's no scoring. If you're looking for more specifically, like a certain person hasn't voted, you can go into the PNMs, but this is the best way to just see, like, if they don't have a score and that's a little weird because they've talked to people, then this is how you can look at that.
Perfect, thanks. Okay, going now to the next one. This is a pretty general question, but they were just wondering how they could score girls and submit it. So score PNMs and submit it.
Okay, yeah, perfect. We'll go over to my voting account here. So first I'll show when you do your setup, and we can go over if there's any questions for this, but typically to first set up, you go into your chapter page here and add and edit your rounds. But once you have this set up and you're ready to open your voting, all you have to do is click the drop down here and move it into your first round, and then you can also open by party as well, and then you change that status. We also have where you can close a round. So like if open house is, we have 12 parties here, but maybe only the first 6 parties are in day 1, you can close the round at the end of the day, or however that works best for you, so you're not getting a bunch of voting overnight or people trying to change things. So this is how you open voting, and then once voting is open, members can log in. This is an admin view, so your normal members won't have all of these tabs here, but they'll definitely have their vote tab. And when they click on that, it will take them immediately to the ballot. And for this, there is parties. So we can see we're in open house round party 1. So it's only going to show the PNMs that are in that party. They can then click on the PNM, or they can type in a name to search for the PNM as well. Click on them. If they need more information and want to look at that, they can click the little light bulb to see anything, just to make sure it's the correct PNM they're voting on, and then they can submit that vote. They can put any comments that they want, something like this, or, great conversationalist, and they can also recommend them to speak to somebody else in the chapter that they think they might get along with. So this is how they can submit their voting. Then they just hit submit, and then once you go over to the PNM list, you'll be able to see, was that Gabby? Gabby now has a vote on her open house round.
Perfect. And then this one kind of goes along with what you just went over. So they're asking how they can upload their pref list so they can track regrets, but also close the rounds. That way actives don't vote on PNMs like once the round's over. So you could just show them where you can upload the parties and then also open and close those rounds again.
Yeah, of course. So going back to this chapter tab here, this is where you can advance your rounds and then also advance your parties if you do party setup. You can also, you don't have to use parties, so you can do open voting as well and not have parties. And then this is where you can open and close your rounds. So like I said, if open house spans over multiple days and you want to close that round, you can change that status. And now if I go to vote, voting's closed for that round. They won't be able to submit any votes until you reopen that, or advance to the next and open that.
Thank you. And then they also had another part of their question where they were asking about, I believe they're asking if they can delete a round and it still keep the scores, or if they wanted to delete a round, what would be the best thing they can do to keep that data? So maybe how they could download it before resetting their account.
Yeah, so typically once you start voting, it's very, very difficult to delete a round. Sometimes those votes don't, just because you've removed a round doesn't mean the votes disappear. So it kind of makes things a little wonky when you try and delete it and you've already started voting. But obviously you don't want to do a master reset in the middle of it, because then that is clearing everything out of there. So best thing to do with that, if there are votes that are incorrect, you could go in and delete the votes on the PNM, which might be a little more tedious, but you can click on the PNM and you can go into the vote details and delete the vote. Really though, the best way to just avoid that in general, because like I said, it throws a lot of things off, and for some who maybe have organization specific rounds or voting, that's going to make things even more crazy. The best way to avoid that is just make sure that when you're setting everything up, when you're setting up your rounds, set them all up at one time. So as you can see, even though we're only voting in open house right now, we've set up all of our rounds all the way up to preference and loaded our parties for that. And then once you open your voting, making sure that everybody is submitting things correctly, which is pretty easy to control with this. And then as long as people are voting on the right PNM, there's very minimal things you have to clean up. But just making sure that that is all set up on the front end is going to be the best way to just avoid that in general.
Thank you. And then the next question we have, they're looking for recommendations for a backup plan in case their Wi-Fi goes out. So if women have a hard time voting on their OmegaRecruit app because their phone's not connecting, maybe it's stormy and it's not letting them log in. So backup plans, if you have any recommendations.
Yeah, so y'all know that university Wi-Fi is not always the best, but I think it's kind of subjective to the chapter, so kind of whatever you want to do. I know when I was in my sorority, we this was before we had voting apps, we used to have like note cards, like colored note cards that we would write on. So if anything does happen, maybe just having some sort of backup thing where they can write P&M's name and whatever information. And then you as the admin, because you have the ability here to open and close rounds, you can go in and open voting later if something is messing up. So you can always go back to a round and a party and then say, hey, because Wi-Fi was out when we were in party 3, I'm going to go ahead and reopen that. If you have cards from P&Ms you spoke to during party 3, go ahead and submit those votes now. Things like that are going to be the best way, especially because you want the information in the system so you can see everything, and it's less work on you to individually put it in. You can just go reopen that round at a later time. I would just say whatever works best for your chapter in terms of having something written down, or if you want to have your members just go in and vote later, but if you want to make sure that they, the information is fresh on their mind, you can have something for them to write on in between parties.
I agree with
Think
that, especially with some of those bigger recruitments. I know it can be, you think you'll remember, and then 2 rounds later, it's already out of your mind. So I definitely recommend writing down as well. This question is asking if there's a bulk way to edit statuses for a particular round. They do both COB and primary recruitment.
the only way that rounds can be bulk edited like statuses. So I think what this person is referring to, just so everybody has a good idea of what we're looking at, when you start to advance, you can have round like status changes. So if Claire has not been invited back to the sisterhood round, we can change her status to regret or withdrawn, however you want to do that, or released. With parties, you can bulk edit essentially by not having them listed in a future party. So let's say, Shelby here is not going to be coming back to Sisterhood round. When you go to upload your parties for round 2, you would just not have a party listed for Shelby. So this is only going to work for party voting. If you have open voting, unfortunately, there's no way to bulk edit those. One thing that I have seen with party or with open voting that people will do to kind of get around that and help them, you could do party voting and just have one party that everyone's in. So to give a little more context, when you're uploading the party file, it's going to look like this. So basically you just pull all the MINs, which are the member identification numbers. You should get that from whatever program your university is using when they send you the list of the girls. But you'll just take the member identification number or maybe like PNM ID and put the party that they're in next to that. So what I've seen some people do is instead of doing open voting, they do party voting, but they only have one party listed. So everybody would just have a 1 by their name, but then anybody not coming back would have nothing by their name. And then it would move all those members automatically to regret. That's kind of a wonkier way to do it, but if you're not wanting to sit there, especially if you're a really big school and it's, really tedious for you to go through and mark everybody, with a status change, that's a good way to do it. Typically, though, if you're a bigger school, you're probably using party voting anyways. Hannah, would you add anything to that?
No, I think you pretty much covered what I would have said. So for our next questions, these ones kind of go together. One of the questions was which resource is most useful to truly learn the ropes of OmegaRecruit? And then the other question was asking when they'll have access to training materials. If I'm giving my opinion, I'm probably going to say going back to watch one of our mock recruitments or summer webinar series webinars. They're a little bit longer, about an hour, but it goes start to finish through every step of recruitment. Would you agree, Sarah Beth?
Yes. Also, on that same vibe, if you go to the training right here, this also takes you through. So like here's the video here if you want to watch it, but then also this is kind of like a picture step by step. The video is going to have more like tidbits in there that are going to help you out the most. But if you maybe aren't able to watch and you just want to run through these really quick, that is going to be really helpful. And I would say after watching or going through these, the best thing is to just get in the system and work with it. So I would suggest doing practice recruitments. You can always master reset after any practice recruitments and run it again. I think the more you do that and practice setting up your account, that's going to help you to just be familiar with it, and that's going to be the best way to help you understand OmegaRecruit.
I agree. And just to confirm, those are always up for them, right? So they don't have to start recruitment or anything to be able to access those?
Correct. Yeah, these are always up as soon as you are logged into the system. So if you're an admin, you should already have access. If not, you'll need to get with a previous admin and have them add you to OmegaRecruit and get you updated as an admin. Or if you're already added as a member from fall, you'll just need to have someone update you to admin status. And once you have that, you have the training here, you have your configuration page, which just is going to tell you any voting information you may have. And then the Get Help button here is going to take you to our help center. This is just any information you might need. We have some different categories here if you want to look at them specifically, or if you have more specific questions, you can search and it'll pull up articles to help.
Thank you for those. And then we're down to our last two pre-submitted questions. So the next one is kind of, again, a general question, but what would you say the most common mistake is when using OmegaRecruit? Or maybe a couple common ones you see?
I think the most that we see coming in during recruitment is round setup. So when you're under your round setup, so on the left-hand side under the chapter tab, edit rounds, when you are first setting this up, before you ever start anything, you should set up all of your rounds and your parties. I think the biggest thing I see is people will only add a few rounds and not organize it fully. You typically know how many rounds of recruitment you're going to have. Even if you're not particularly sure on the party, you can always change that. That's a little easier to change. Having that set up to begin with and making sure that you don't have too many rounds. So there is a 20 round limit. If your organization has any type of like pre-score or admin score, those will take up rounds. So just keep that in mind. But then also the party voting helps you not have so many rounds. So you don't have to divide it up. If open house spans multiple days and you have multiple different parties coming, you don't have to have 12 rounds for open house. You can just have one, open and close the voting each night, and either have parties or have your open voting depending. But if it's still under what would be considered round one, you just have that one round. So I think making sure your rounds are condensed correctly and then set up at the beginning. A lot of times if they're not set up at the beginning or they're set up incorrectly, that's when we see things like the question we had earlier, like what happens if I delete a round and stuff. You kind of want to avoid running into that at all. And so I think really pay attention to your round setup. And if you have any questions about your round setup before recruitment, while you're doing practice recruitment, you can always send an email to that recruitment_support. But most of it, if you're watching that video, kind of explains, and you should be able to set those up and figure out what's going to work best for your chapter. But I would say that's the biggest mistake because it just has a ripple effect. Hannah, do you have anything you want to add to that or a different thing that you think?
No, I think that probably is the biggest thing because I think all the other issues people run into pretty much stem from that. So I would say that would be the root of most problems. So if you get the rounds right, everything else is pretty smooth sailing or pretty easy to fix if you accidentally put in a vote wrong or something like that. And then our last pre-submitted question is asking if you can change the weight or score of rounds through OmegaRecruit in some way. So the example they gave was like count round one as like, let's say it was out of 15 points, they wanted to change it to 10. Are they able to change those weights on their own, or is that something they would have to manually do outside of OmegaRecruit?
So there is not a way to, in OmegaRecruit, change the scores. The best way, if you're wanting to weight scores or do any sort of calculations with scoring, you can, on the P&M list here, as well as under several of our different reports, you can export either the P&M list, which will have your votes listed in it. If we look at that really quick, it'll have your voting, and then you can go in and, if you're really savvy with Excel, you can update the vote for round one to be weighted a certain way with the Excel formula or whatever it may need to be. All these negative ones you're seeing, that's just people who don't have a vote. But so you can export this and then manipulate the file from there. That's going to be the best way if you have any sort of specialization on your voting that you need to do that's not already in there, that's really the only way you can do that is outside of the actual Omega Recruit system. But you can pull this every night after either after your rounds, or you can pull it for each party, whatever is best for you to break that down.
All right, perfect. And that sums up all of our pre-submitted questions. So we can switch over to the chat now. Again, if you've submitted a question in the chat and you're wanting to unmute or chat directly with us, you can raise your hand. There's a little hand raise feature. If not, again, no pressure. We'll just go through them. So starting at the top, I really like these questions because they're bringing me back to recruitment. I feel like I have so many memories from this. So one of the questions is asking what they can do when they have a member in their chapter that doesn't really care, maybe isn't like super interested in talking to the PNMs when they're around. And I can give my take on it, and then Sarah Beth, you can give yours just because I've had a second to look at these. But I know the way my chapter did it is we had different teams in recruitment. So maybe they're shy or they're just really not, they don't feel the best like recruiting people directly face to face. And that's fine. So maybe they have like a different role in recruitment they could do. Maybe they could help like decorate the space, or if you have a committee for that. I know we had a membership team in my chapter where they were more behind the scenes of recruitment. So they were making sure, like as Sarah Beth was showing before, all those parties were submitted, kind of doing that behind the scenes work. So the girls who were out front actually talking to the PNMs didn't have to also go in the back and make sure that all of this back end stuff was working. We only had to worry about voting. So I would maybe talk with your member and see where their interests are like within the recruitment process, and maybe they could be put onto like a different team or role. But Sarah Beth, what would you say?
I would agree with that. And then I think also with using Omega Recruit, kind of the inverse of that, if you have people that are really great with recruitment, you can always use, like we have a starred feature in our columns. You can select the star feature and you can star people to speak to people. So if like these are for the PNM. So like if you have a PNM you really want to recruit, you can star them, and then under your users you can star them as well. If they're really great recruiters, you can go under your users to your user list and star them. And then you can use the matching tool to match them accordingly. So if you know certain people aren't as good of recruiters or maybe aren't as interested, you could just not star them. Or also you can use these as like groups for like if you do bump groups or anything like that, you can group people up, and then certain groups may just have those like different responsibilities like Hannah was saying. So you can kind of organize that in Omega Recruit as well to make sure that your best recruiters or the people who are best to speak with the PNM is speaking to them. Same with the matching feature, not just the starred. You can do recommendations. So if other members who are also good at, recruiting and are really enjoying the process are like, hey, I think they would really do well speaking to this other member, they can put that on their ballot when they submit it, or just in their general login. I think that's a good way to make sure that you're putting your best members forward, and then your other members who maybe just aren't as great at recruiting, you can put them in something they're gonna enjoy and be best at.
Okay, and then the other question they submitted is asking for advice on how they could encourage someone to join their chapter who really wants to be in it, but isn't like fully set on joining because her friend is not interested. Again, like my 2 cents on that would be, well, I have a few comments, I guess. One, I would say if you have like a leadership consultant or somebody with your headquarters or international headquarters, they can give such great advice. Ours gave us so many talking points and tricks and different ways to talk with PNMs to help make them feel at ease, but also like comfortable enough to open up. And you want to encourage them to join, but you also don't want to force somebody to be in your chapter who doesn't want to be there. If it's just because of her friend, I would say like maybe just reassure her that joining your sorority doesn't mean she no longer can be friends with the people she's friends with. All through college, the girls that lived on my floor freshman year, we stayed friends like throughout college and even after. And we all joined, I think all of us except one joined a different sorority. And we even had some who didn't join a sorority at all. And I don't think it really limits you by joining one. So I would just let her know, like, best case scenario, she just gets more friends out of it. So she gets more friends in y'all sorority, but also If her friend joins a different one, then she's going to meet new people, and then you basically can combine friend groups. So I think there's a lot of benefits to doing different things than your friends. Also, it's fun if she does want to join and be with your friend. If they both want to join, even better. But I think you could just show her the pros. Sarah Beth, what would you say? I know you were a recruitment counselor, so I'm sure you ran into this a ton.
Yeah, I think like you said, speaking to your advisors and stuff, or even older sisters, and I think even from a logistical standpoint, having the right people talk to the right P&Ms. So like I was saying earlier with the matching, really utilize that tool. Have your members submit recommendations for matches so that you're putting the people who they're going to most relate to and make them enjoy the chapter and like see that there are a lot of people like them. So again, having them just talk to the best member for them to relate to, I think.
Perfect. And then let's see what other questions we have come in. There was a question about accidentally doing a master reset and if they can get that data back.
So no, unfortunately, if you do a master reset, that data is gone. So we definitely suggest like don't do a master reset at any point once you've started actual voting. If you are doing practice rounds and you're just running through practice multiple times, you can master reset as many times as you need to. But as soon as you start putting in your actual P&Ms and your so like when I say actual P&Ms, if you go to the general setup page that you'll typically be taken to when you log in, here is where you have like practice files. So we've supplied those for you guys so you can run through your practice recruitment. So once you've actually put your real P&Ms in though and are setting up your rounds for actual recruitment and start your voting, stay very far away from the master reset button until you're done and you've pulled all the reporting that you need afterwards.
Yes, very important. Let's keep going. Another question we have in. Okay, so they're asking if their chapter uses ICS, but ICS does not have a round one voting. Can they disconnect and reconnect again after the round? Will it mess up their current data?
With ICS, you can disconnect and reconnect from it in between rounds. Not everybody like all schools who use ICS don't necessarily set up rounds and parties. So if they haven't set up rounds in the same way, it might be difficult to use it in that same formatting, but you still want to pull in your P&Ms that are participating each time so you can disconnect and reconnect. And if you're an ICS chapter, you can do that under the chapter tab, go over to your ICS info, and then you can choose like click this here and it'll walk you through linking your ICS, and then you would go to the same tab to unlink it in the middle of recruitment, and that won't mess up any of the scoring if you unlink during the middle of it. The only thing that is tied to is uploading your P&Ms and uploading your parties. So you would be good to go on that.
Okay, and let's see if more adding to the chat. Okay, I think you kind of covered this already, Sarah Beth. But if you don't mind showing it one more time, just because the question's here. They're asking where they can organize their P&Ms by bump group, if there's a possibility for that. I know you went over bump groups on like the user side of things.
Yeah, so like Hannah was saying, on the user side of things, you can organize your bump groups here, give your members a number based on their bump group. So it'll be like their group number. And then for the P&Ms under your matching, it will pull. So like when you generate your matches, it doesn't associate it with a P&M. You have to put your P&Ms with whatever bump group, but it will show what group number your member is in. So these are the matches that generated based off the selections we had on the matching page, and you can manipulate that how you want. We have a lot of information on how to utilize the matching, but like for instance, Amber here matched with this P&M and this P&M, and she's in group 1. So you might want to have these two P&Ms rotate in that bump group. Obviously, you'd have more numbers here, but yeah, you can do that under the user tab under your user list. Hannah, do we have any more questions?
A couple more, actually, yes. Let's see here. So this question's asking the best way to upload PNM data or admin scores without errors occurring. So I know you showed them where they can add those, but do you have any tips on avoiding errors so those go in smoothly?
Yeah, so if we're looking at, we'll do upload PNMs because I know we looked at upload parties. Um, this one is a lot more complicated though, so we'll kind of look at this. When you're uploading this, typically, if you're not an ICS user, because ICS, if you're connected to that, it will just have the option like upload from ICS. But for anybody else, if they use like Campus Director or whatever else they may have for your recruitment, they will like your Greek advisor should send you a file with all the PNMs in it, and it may not be formatted like this, but basically you would follow this formatting, very plain, no like specialization, italics, nothing like special formatting wise on it. Everything should be just as plain as possible. And then following these headers. You don't have to use all these headers. Like not all of them are required. I think only MIN first and last name are required, but all the rest, if you are going to use them, just make sure you are following that to a T. So for example, one that we see a lot of times like be messed up is the URL or PNM picture. If you put in PNM pic or photo, anything like that, it's not going to upload. It's only going to recognize these two headers. So just make sure you're following these down to a T to make sure all that information is pulling in, as well as if you do have other information you want to add, you can use these custom columns that we have. So we have custom 1 through 6. So you have 6 different columns that you can use for any custom information. You would just label them as custom 1, 2, 3, 4, so on. And then you can redo the name under the chapter tab that we've been looking at a lot. And then after you formatted it all correctly, you want to save it as the Excel 97 2003 workbook, and that will get you good to go. If there are any issues within the file, when you go to upload it, it will tell you. So it'll say, like, you'll either get a green box under here that says like PNMs or, X number of PNMs uploaded, or you'll get an error message and it'll say like error on line 100 or whatever, and it normally will tell you like what the error is. So it's easy to fix. I know I mentioned the custom columns. If you do have those, under the chapter tab here, you can go to edit custom columns, and that's where you can change the name of them. So when you're actually looking at the PNM list, it's pulling in for whatever name you want it to be, not custom column 1. I think that is all for that question. Hannah, would you add anything?
Mhm. No, I think you got it all. The next question we have is, how can I filter columns? There's too many to shift through and I don't need them all.
Yeah, so on the PNM list here, this is like your main hub for everything. So this is where you see like all your scoring and whatnot. It may look like this is first and you may need to add columns or you may need to take away. You can filter your columns under this little, we call it a hamburger menu because it looks like a little hamburger. So these 3 lines up here in the top right-hand corner, you can go to select columns and you can customize this any way that you see fit. So you can put their major, you can do admin notes. We did the starred column earlier. If you have custom columns, you can pull those in. Always make sure though you have your rounds in. So you want to make sure you have all your voting rounds in so you can see that, as well as the overall round. Sometimes that may not be checked and so you're like, where's my overall round? So make sure you're checking those if you think you're missing anything, and it'll then add those columns. Same if you want to get rid of some, you can go customize it and it will remove any columns.
Alrighty. And then these next 2 questions kind of go together in that I think they have probably similar answers. So one of them is asking, why can't they go between their vault and their OmegaRecruit account, even though their chapters already added them to both? They're just wondering why that is. And then the second one is saying they keep trying to log in, but it tells them they don't have access, but they know that their chapter has added them. They're wondering how they can fix that.
Yeah. So like you said, Hannah, they kind of go together. So for the one, if it's saying that you don't have access, then your chapter probably added you with a different email. So if you're going to log into OmegaRecruit and you're trying with your personal email, then it might be under your school email that they added you, and that's why it's saying you don't have access. Um, and then with the other, if you're not able to go in between the two, but you know you've logged into OmegaRecruit, you probably logged in with a different email. So it may be that your OmegaRecruit has your school email address, and then your My OmegaFi or Omega One login is your personal email address, and that's why you can't toggle using um, this up here with the little grid. You won't be able to toggle if it's not under the same email. So you can always check your other logins, see what email you're using, and ask if your admin can, or like you can have your if a member is having that, they can ask you to re-add them with the correct email address. That's also why it's good to have your members log in a week early. You can catch any of this and fix it. And so you would literally just go in and you can delete the incorrect email address and then just go to add users and add them with the other email address that they use.
Thank you for that. And that was actually our last two questions that we have so far. I know we have about 10 minutes left of allotted time. So if anybody maybe was thinking about a question, was too nervous to put it in the chat, or is on the fence, I think you could throw it in there now and we'll go over it. We still have some time, but again, no pressure. What did you say about you could pull up that? Yep.
Yep.
You're way ahead of me.
And if we don't get any more questions in, I am just going ahead putting this up here. If you want to take a screenshot of it before you head on out, just make sure you have that information. Like I said, you can do the get help, and that takes you to the help center. We have a bunch of articles, or email recruitment_support@omegafi.com. And again, I just wanted to emphasize that during the peak recruitment time, we do have 24/7 support on that. So once you submit your email, they will get back to you as quickly as possible. But I don't see anything else coming in, so I think that kind of concludes today. So thank you all for joining us, and we hope you guys have a wonderful recruitment.